My name is Priya, and I am the co-founder of FoodWise. And I'm here together with Chaitali and Shruti, who are also part of the team, as well as with Alice Tondella from the University of Gastronomic Sciences of Colenso, Italy. This webinar is a series of 6 webinars that we are doing over this week and really through the month of June as part of what we call STHIRA, which is a sustainable food innovation challenge for university students in India. It's the first challenge of its kind anywhere in the world, and this year it's our second edition. The purpose of creating such a ideation and learning experience really is to involve young people within India in the subject of the resilience of food systems for the future, and in particular to see if we can come up with new ideas and solutions for the many complex and multidimensional problems that plague the security of food systems for the future. So these webinars actually are all about the themes that we have for this year. One of the themes is minimizing or reducing food waste. In some sense, a very simple, straightforward subject, but incredibly complex, and why it exists in the first place and what can be done about it. So today our speaker, Alice, is going to introduce Franco, but I'm going to say just briefly, Franco Facio, who has very graciously made the time to do this session, is a assistant professor at the University of Gastronomic Sciences of Italy, and in many ways is really also an expert in the subject of circular economy. But to introduce him, as well as to introduce the University of Gastronomic Sciences, I'm going to hand over briefly to Alice.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Priya. Hello to everyone. My name is Alice Tondella. I'm part of the executive committee at the University of Gastronomic Sciences in Italy, which is a university founded by the Slow Food Movement in 2004. And at the moment, UNISC is the only university in the world which is solely dedicated to the study of food through a 360 degrees perspective and an interdisciplinary approach. I'm very happy to say that this is the second year that we are running this challenge together with FoodWise, with UNISC partner in this activity, and Priya is one of our most prominent alumni from India. She studied at UNISC. And to discuss the topic of food waste, today we have Franco Facio, who is Associate Professor of Industrial Design at UNISC, where he teaches courses such as systemic design, eco-design, circular economy for food. And I would like to point out that he is the person who actually came out with the definition of circular economy, specifically applied to food systems. Then he teaches also courses related to gastronomic design science, food packaging, and company creation. And he's probably among the most prominent speakers when it comes to the topic of food waste analyzed through the lens of system thinking. So I'm very happy that we today with him will have the opportunity to dive into how reimagining food system can actually help us to cut down food waste and bring back the lost value of food. So I'm not taking any more time to Franco Facios, and I lead the word to you.
Okay, thank you very much for these beautiful words, Alice. It's really a pleasure for me to be here with you today, unfortunately only virtually, but it's important for me to make my personal contribution to the STHIRA project. About 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to visit part of your country on educational trips organized by my university, and I have wonderful memories of it. So thank you for that. You are a complicated but really beautiful country, in my opinion. Well, I will now share my screen so that I can show you the presentation I have prepared for this occasion. Okay. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, today I will speaking about the issue that affect the sustainability of food systems with a particular focus on food waste and circular economy. Let me say that India wasted nearly 78.2 million tons of food each year, which is enough to feed 377 million people, according to the United Nations Environmental Program data for 2024. These equates to 26.5% of the country's annual per capita staple food requirements. So food loss occurs from farm to fork, from farm to market, while food waste often occurs, at the retail and consumer level. Anyway, reducing food loss and waste across the supply chain will help, in my opinion, to build sustainable and equitable food system, reducing economic losses and the strain on natural ecosystems, while also reducing greenhouse gas emission, for example, improving access to nutritious foods and increasing farmers' income also. As you know, the problem of food loss and waste is widespread across the planet. But why does it happen, and what other issue it is linked to? Well, before we begin, just a few words about myself so we can get to know each other better. As Alice said before, I'm a systemic food designer, an associate professor of systemic design, eco-design, circular economy for food at the University of Gastronomic Science of Pollenzo in Italy. But anyway, my research and teaching are focused on the development of an holistic project vision applied to gastronomy, joining economic, social, cultural, and environmental demands to structure, to design new relationships between human beings and nature. So going deeper with the various jobs that I carry out, in this slide, my main current commitments and roles. But anyway, let me say only one thing. In general, I can say with certainty that the adoption of a systemic approach and the circular economy for food make it possible to design new cultural framework that are more sustainable and connected with nature. So let's start this speech with simple questions. Can anyone listening tell me why the 12th of August of this year, that according to your calendar, Saka Samvat, if it's correct, is the 21 Sharavana, I think, is an important date in the Indian calendar? Does anyone know this? No one? Okay, no problem. I will tell you, because the 12th of August will be for India, the Earth Overshot Day, the day when India had used up all the natural resources available to them for 2015, and will have begun to overuse the planet without giving ecosystem time to regenerate. Of course, it is not just an Indian problem, obviously. All the dates you see on this slide are symbolic dates for each of our country, because highlighting the ecological deficit in which we live. From that day onward, we are technically in debt to future generation, from whom we are borrowing resources, allowing also us to waste a good part of it. But why does this happen? I asked myself many times, and the answer I felt I needed to work on was given to me by Marco Deramo, an Italian journalist and essayist would say to me, we have an idea of happiness in our mind that consumes the world. So to continue to contribute to sustainable development, to reduce food waste and loss, also in the context of your country, we can start by working on idea of happiness and try not to link it to unbridled consumption, material possession, constant growth, secondary needs, endless cycle of production and waste. We are calling upon to question established habits that in the pursuit of personal happiness risk compromising our collective future. In this respect, we can say that it is a question of cultural attitude. And based on this concept, now we are going to do another quick game together to rethink our posture. Because I got this game from the work of Dennis Meadow, a professor emeritus of system management at the University of New Hampshire, from many years president of the International System Dynamics Society, of which I am a member of the Italian chapter. That said, many of you will probably be familiar with Dennis Meadow as co-authors of the publication The Limit to Grow, published in 1972. Okay, let's start with this short game. It's a very simple exercise. It won't be easy to do online, but we will give it a try. Well, I can kindly ask you to cross your arm. Please now look at which wrist, this part of the body, is on the top. Okay, good. Now lower your arms, free, and now cross them again. And look again to see which wrist is on top. Okay. You can lower your arms, thank you. So at this point, I would like to ask you, did anyone change position, putting a right wrist on top the first time and the left wrist on top the second time?
I did not.
Same.
No, I did
Was
not
same.
change it.
It was
Yeah,
the same. I tried to change it, but it was so awkward that I went back to the same one.
Exactly. Usually in a class of 100 people, between 5 and 10 people at most change their posture. And this result is normal because we all acquire habits that suit us and we repeat them. That's how we grow. Over the last 2 centuries, we have adopted a series of habits from the nature of financial system, for example, to the indicators we have chosen for success, from what we believe is right for us in terms of education and therefore pass on to our children and so on. A whole series of habits that we have developed and that have worked well for us in a certain circumstance. But sometimes circumstances change, and now they have changed. Therefore, for this reason, we need to develop new habits. So follow me again, try crossing your arm in the opposite direction to how you did before, please. Did you do it? Perfect. Well, if you have done so, free, now, please, you will have noticed 3 things that are also true in our search for sustainable food system and the reducing, obviously, of food waste and loss. First, it's possible. Second, we need to think about it and probably make mistake when we start. And third, it's a little uncomfortable at first, but it's possible. Well, in my opinion, this simple exercise encourages us to consider the importance of adopting a different cultural stance when approaching the food waste, the food systems in general. And for this reason, through scientific consideration, analysis of data on the health of the food system and possible cultural frameworks that can be adopted to design sustainable development, my desire today, in few words, is to share information and perspective to live the circularity on a daily basis. And in particular, to report situations in which we have to redesign the food system to eliminate waste and restore value to food, examining root causes and exploring innovative, culturally rooted solutions for ecological balances, social equity, and obviously mindful consumption. Well, that said, I like to start all my speech with a series of reflection on the importance of adopting a systemic approach when dealing with food. On the other hand, the same word food system say that the scenario in which we want to insert new technologies is a system composed of actors, relationships, and flow, or in other words, stock, flow, feedback loop matters. As you know, we are all one system, an organic whole, characterized by network nested within network, in which not so much the actor of the systems, but what they exchange is decisive. Our planet, it's a dynamic system. As I said before, composed of matter, energy, information, and characterized by stock, flow, and feedback loop, a system in which the equilibrium between the parts is worth more than the sum of the single elements. For this reason, thinking system can help us to make our intuition evolve on the whole systems, to sharpen our ability to understand all the parts involved in the system, to see the interconnection between all the actors, to be creative and courageous about redesign the systems. Why this is important? Because in this context, the similarities between human beings and nature, in my opinion, are impressive, because physically, aesthetically, energetically, in the context in which we live, patterns, models, and dynamics are repeated. However, there is something that differentiates us, because as mankind, we tend to constantly break down the complexities that surround us in linear logical thought. This photo shows us that in nature, there are ecological schema repeating everything, and apparently also in humankind, as I said before. But in the last 2 centuries, especially the Western world, has erected the linear, analytical, and rational logic typical of the left hemisphere of the brain with the unique instrument of knowledge and evaluation, almost totally losing contact with intuition, the analogy, interrelation, that are all the other capability of the right hemisphere of the brain. So, unfortunately, thanks to that, specialization has taken precedence over the overall vision, productivity over quality of life, and performance over health and wellness. It is because of this linear way of thinking that environmental and social degradation can emerge and become evident system errors, as say Carlo Petrini, the president of the International Association of Food and of my university. In the preface to the Italian edition of the book Thinking System by Donella Midio, that I suggest to all of you to read. But also Einstein, many years earlier, suggests the same things, telling us that the left side of the brain should be the humble servant of the right hemisphere of the brain. So I think it is obvious that we have to migrate toward a new economic paradigm, because never in history we are so distant from the dynamic of nature. And we have to work in a systemic way to rebuild, to redesign this connection. For example, nature works thanks to a renewable process and with complex schema. It uses energy and material only when it needs. It recycles everything. It recycles everything because each surplus is metabolized by the system through the dynamic of the 5 kingdoms. On the other side, the human beings have developed an economy that generates non-metabolizable waste, destroy the diversity, cultural and natural, through the homologation, generates models that are not resilient because are standardized, and so on. I believe that all these differences have been perfectly summarized in a sentence by Gregory Bateson, who was a British anthropologist, sociologist, and psychologist, and that wrote a book entitled An Ecology of Mind, that I suggest all to you also to read this book. and in which he said, the major problem in the world are the result of the difference between how nature works, that is, as a system, and the way people think, that is, in most cases, linear. In fact, our economic model are also defined linear economy. Apparently, let me say these things, apparently create abundance, but serves you in a fragile dish. As can be seen thanks to a series of data that give us a snapshot, a photograph of the current state of health of our food system. So proceeding with the objective of analyzing the problem in a systemic perspective, I will now present you a series of reflections that summarize current problem and that are all interconnected scenario, or interconnected with food waste and loss. So, for example, starting from the topic of natural capital, we find ourselves learning that biodiversity is shrinking day by day at a rate of 100 to 1,000 times higher than the rate of physiological extinction associated with natural evolution, obviously. The species are disappearing at the rate of about 27,000 a year. In this, it is a scenario of extreme uncertainty, what we are experiencing. And that can be well summarized by mentioning the Rivet hypothesis developed in 1981 by Paul and Dan Harrich, two ecologists at Stanford University. A theory that compares the species with rivets that keep the structure of an airplane together. By causing the rivet to jump out at random about a certain threshold value, the airplane will collapse immediately. So connected to the natural capital, obviously, there is also the cultural capital. With the decrease of one, the other also decrease, and in particular, the agrobiodiversity. FAO estimates that today, 75% of the variety of agricultural crops have been lost, and that 3/4 of the world's food supply depend on just 12 species of plant and 5 species of animal. In fact, this loss of agrobiodiversity is directly reflected on food. Out of around 30,000 edible species found in nature, food crops that alone account for 95% of the world's energy requirements are just 30. Among these, wheat, rice, and corn provide more than 60% of the calorie we consume. Well, this aspect is quite evident if you look at the graph in which the demographic grow in the right part of the slide, in which the demographic growth and the species extinction trend are represented. It's impressive to see how the increase is similar. The loss of biodiversity has grown with population growth, and this is because we have exploited the land as much as possible to guarantee growth. So sometimes I wonder why it's really so difficult to understand that there can be no infinity growth in a finite system. We are eating the way of life. I like to say, as if we were fish that drink the water of the sea in which they swim. Anyway, unfortunately, we are also rapidly converging toward the promotion of a standardized economy, natural and cultural, as I said before. And it seems even more evident that we work to feed the economy itself rather than to respond to the real primary needs of humanity. In this scenario, the human beings is a vehicle that allows the metabolism of goods, and the offer is so wide that it far exceeds the primary needs, forcing the market to produce secondary needs to invite us to buy and keep producing going. Therefore, a valid indicator, as I said before, that confirms our veracity is the hurt of a short day, which we have already seen at the beginning of this lesson. Well, ladies and gentlemen, exaggerated lifestyles obviously impact heavily on the amount of resources that mankind will have available in the year to come. And this is an important topic connected with food waste and loss, because this applies to mineral reserves as well, which in many cases, in the absence of the recycling phase, raises significant concern regarding the long long-term availability. This is what emerged from the studies developed by Professor Jenny Dodson of the University of York that use Mendeleev's periodic table, describing it a toolbox at the disposal of mankind, and modifying it in order to be able to visualize the unsustainability of the elements. So on one side, you can see on the left side the mineral resources that are running out, and on the other side, the recycle level of the element at the global level. Let me say that in reality, in many cases, it is not correct to say that resources are exhausted or running out, since it would be more appropriate to say that they disperse in the technospheres, remaining a fixed asset whose recovery is often prohibitive, thanks to how many computers do you have at home, how many smartphones, something like that. But anyway, in this precarious and limited scenario, in general, we know that the extraction at the global level of primary material from Earth, so metals, biomass, fossil fuels, minerals, has tripled from 1970 to 2010. So from 22 billion tons of material per year, it has reached 70 billions, from a global average of 6 tons per capita to 10. And obviously, as you know, all not equally distributed among countries. It is estimated, thanks to this research, that in 2050, by maintaining the production and consumption rates stable, it will be necessary to introduce as input at the global level around 180 billion tons of natural resources into the systems, or 20 tons per year per capita. But however, 29 billion tons will still be missing. This is an important data to think and to adopt and to motivate circular economy existence as a new model. Well, this problem is becoming more and more evident in some scenarios, such as not only food, obviously, but also such as that of rare earth metals that is connected with food, used in many of the technology that we use every day, such as computers, smartphone, other technology connected with agriculture. As you know, their finding is becoming more and more a problem for the diffusion of many of technology necessary for the ecological transition. And so also, for example, for photovoltaic panels or electrical batteries, something like that. Well, in my opinion, the problem of finding raw materials, such as the precious rare earths, for the development of information technologies, we one of the main issues to be explored by adopting systemic vision, because there are many actors involved, the boundaries are global, and so we are faced with a complex problem composed of many and many variables. Unfortunately, what is already clear to everyone, I think, is that our economy model is based on a parasitic symbiosis, like the symbiosis that exists between a mosquito and humanity. And two phenomena highlight this situation: the large scale of farmland, or also called land grabbing, and the water acquisition, or also called water grabbing. As you know, farmland acquisition is also frequently realized in a contract of concession from 20 to 99 years of a land to guarantee the direct control of a certain amount of land and obviously its resources. Well, in 2090, 10% of investors in land grabbing had the 68% of the acquired land, amounting the same size of half Western Europe, let me say. Almost half of the land acquired, obviously, is in Africa. And on the Land Matrix, a website that I put in on the downside of the slide in the left side, you can find a continuous update on this type of information. The other obvious phenomenon is water grabbing. And water grabbing and the management of water is incredibly connected with food, obviously. It's a situation where dominant actors secure water control for their own advantage, depriving weaker one. Well, since 19th today, there have been more than 675 water conflicts, as evidenced by the Pacific Institute database. And the scenario tends to worsen as the effect of climate change increases, obviously. This talk about rare earths and mineral in general, I can say that is related to food, because in 2050, when the world population will exceed 10 billion people, not only the mineral reserves or water will be a problem, but also the demand for energy will grow by 30%. Also due to the fact that it will be necessary to support an increase of 70% in agricultural production, obviously on the global level. This is a situation that we will have to face shortly as the issue of the reducing harmful emission for the ecosystems, because currently CO2 concentration have increased by 135% compared to the pre-industrial level, and so before 70-50. Well, we know that due to the production up to the sale of food, around 3.3 billion tons of CO2 is generated. That is around the 30% of whole greenhouse gas emission. Well, I think that you know very well that what we put on the table determines change on the thermometer of the planet. Our plate influences the climate and is in turn influenced by it in a relationship of interconnected dualism. Some speak of a phenomenon typical of the planet Earth, which by its nature passes between glacial and interglacial period. But the truth is that in 2090, atmospheric concentration of CO2 were the highest in the last 2 million years, while concentration of methane and nitrous oxide were the highest in the last 800,000 years. And both far exceeded the natural multi-millennium change between glacials and interglacial periods. Well, it states that in order to maintain the global warming trajectory within 1.5 Celsius degree and to avoid entering into a situation in which we don't know how to predict how the planet system will react, global emission should be reduced by around 50% by 2030. But we all already know that we will not be able to reach it, unfortunately. Also in this case, forecasting system based on the complexity of dynamics will be increasingly useful to calculate, for example, future scenario and monitor the present. But let me say that this information, for example, that many farmers, because the climatic zone are shifting toward the pole in both hemispheres, resulting in a change in the thermal condition of the cultivated area, which means, for example, that the 50-node parallel, which is the historic limit of viticulture in Europe, is no longer the case due to the global warming, as this increase in temperature is pushing the cultivation of wine farther north and further up. Well, thanks to research conducted by FAO, we know that the change in the geographical production on a global scale will have an effect on food trade flow, with implication for farmers' incomes and possible price increase of up to 23% by 2050, compared to the scenario without climate change. This scenario will lead to an increase in resource wars and worsening rise of people living in extractive areas, unfortunately. Instead, returning to for a couple of slides on the topic of water, I would like to make you think again about how we are managing it, and about the connection of the reserves with problems related to our health and the food waste and loss. Starting with from the consideration that As you know, 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, of which 97% is salt water. The remaining 3% is fresh water, but only 1% of water is accessible for human use. It's important to know that because currently about 13 countries out of 177 hold around 60% of the world's renewable water resources. And in this context, it's important because in this context, agricultural production represents the cause of 69% of water consumption. But at the same time, nitrogen and phosphorus used in the fields to increase crop yields are contaminating groundwater sources, aquifer, and changing global biogeochemical cycle. And let me say, to make matters worse, due to the fact that we produce around 300 million tons of plastic per year worldwide, out of which about 8 million end up in the sea, plastic is mankind an headway in the human food chain. In the whole media report 2070 entitled "The Plastic Inside Us," thanks to a survey carried out all over the world, tell us how about 83% of the world's drinking water is currently contaminated with microplastic. So plastic is now everywhere, is everything we eat. Let me say add something about that because a team of Spanish researchers studied in 2070 21 types of table salt. The same included marine salt before and after packaging, and the microplastic content found was between 50 and 250 parts of microplastic per kilograms of salt, with polyethylene as the most frequently detected polymer, followed by polypropylene. But anyway, another study of 24 German beer brands bottled in a glass showed that out of 12 ales, 5 wheat beers, and 7 non-alcoholic beers bought in supermarket, every single bottle contained plastic fragment, fibers, and granules. Also in the honey and in other products connected with water, obviously. In general, we know that in terms of composition, the main microplastics found were polyethylene, polypropylene, and polycarbonate. So the problem of plastic is connected to the issue of packaging management, but also on the issue of textiles, cosmetics, building, and marine paint. But one of the main causes of microplastic in our ocean, and so on to our plate, is the road freight logistic, because of the decay of the plastic that make up our tires. So it's important to reason also to the logistic of the food in general, and also of the food waste and loss. If you want to explore this further, take a look at the amazing 5 plastic islands that have formed in our ocean. The largest is called the Pacific Trash Vortex, and it is an island of 10 million square kilometers, coming mostly from China, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam. But also our sea, the Mediterranean Sea, is not very in good health. In fact, in some locations, the microplastic concentration does not have equal in other areas of the Earth. Especially, I don't know if you know, between Corsica and Tuscany, with 10 kilograms of microplastic per square kilometer. A quantity of plastic is so high that on the scientific level, we are starting to call the Mediterranean plastic soup. Well, we are accumulating waste in our ocean, in landfill, so wasting some incredible materials, and also inside our body. In fact, unfortunately, There are materials and substances that modify our physiological balance, non-natural substances that are difficult to be metabolized by our body, and it is not just microplastic. Well, the European Food Safety Authority has published numerous articles on the contamination of our organism due to the substances that are used in farm or intensive agriculture. So, for example, it is estimated that an Italian, on an average every year, together with normal food, intakes 12 kilograms of chemical substances. So, for example, fungicidi, insecticidi, herbicides, and 9 grams of antibiotics, equivalent of 4 doses of antibiotics. And it is not even surprising that the World Health Organization indicates that the risk of mortality due to illness linked to poor nutrition has exceeded that of diseases caused by insufficient caloric intake. Finally, we are witnessing a real crisis of reason, quoting Einstein in this case. A crisis of reason that really reveals itself in its senselessness when we approach the topic of food loss and food waste. Because on a global level, we throw away around 1.3 billion tons of food, around 80,600 cruise ships, to do a metaphor. And we know that it is worth a total of about $1,700 billion. And at the same time, we know that about $667 billion a year would be needed to eliminate world hunger by 2030, an investment corresponding to 0.3% of the world GDP. In conclusion, also, according to life cycle assessment calculation, it was mathematically encountered that together with wasted food, we are literally throwing away 250 billion liters of water annually and 1.4 billion hectares of land. Let me say, guys, that this complex overview, obviously, is the blacklist, is only a selection of data on the impact of food. Many other indicators, such as those of animal welfare or genetification, soil, show how in the food system everything is connected in a relationship of reciprocal evolution or involution. So let me conclude this section saying that I think that in this precise historical period, we have to help humanity avoid compromising relation with the best raw material supply known to mankind. This is obviously the nature. Without any doubt, the current geopolitical challenge of the food system is therefore to revolutionize the productive model, starting from a correct management of natural capital, to which human, cultural, and economic capital are connected, respecting the planetary limits, and at the same time offering a fair space to the civil society. Quoting Kay Rowles and Johan Rockström. There is an extreme need to move from a linear economy to a more circular, regenerative, and systemic economy, which dialogue and communicates with nature. In my opinion, at this moment in history, the best approach to change an economy model that is largely destroying the planet and society, as we know, is system thinking. And a valuable political, economic, and cultural tool we can adopt is the circular economy. On the other hand, it should not be something so difficult to understand and to implement as it is. In fact, as I said before, we are part of the planetary system. And in turn, as human beings, we are an open system characterized by flow of matter, energy, and information, circular dynamics inside and outside. And in fact, to each our action corresponds a feedback loop that affects the planetary systems. In this sense, circularity belongs to the humanity and to the context in which he lives. For example, some things that start when we eat something. As you know, food is the medium through which the circular process of metabolization of matter in the human body begins and is consequential transforming into energy for life. A thought that pushed the German philosopher Ludwig Feuerbach to affirm in the second half of the 19th century that we are what we eat. This last point and many other points previously mentioned by me are found in my last book, written together with my colleague Nadia Tecco, Circular Economy for Food, Media and Technology in a Circle. It's a book that, as a representative at the world level, the first educational publication on the focus of circular economy applied to food. A scientific reflection that allows us to develop the theoretical side of circular economy. And on the other side, by analyzing many case history of international companies operating in the circular economy and in the food system to understand how the new economic paradigm is evolving. Well, using the metric provided by the model called the wedding cake, which was developed by Roxanne Sackted of the Stockholm Resilience Center, a model that shows us how food is an actor in relation to all the 70 Sustainable Development Goals promoted by the United Nations. We have calculated how the survey case history do make an impact on the 70 SDGs. Well, what emerged is a picture in which it is evident that even if many companies currently are working on circular economy for food, they pay little attention to safeguarding of the base of the cake. That is the dimension of the biosphere, which contains and supports the social and economic plan. The conclusion is therefore that the new economic paradigm risks becoming a model that favors a manipulative approach to waste, a situation that could paradoxically lead to an acceleration of planet obsolescence. So to avoid this negative possibility, since 2018, as a university, we have been working to better define the cultural framework in which, in our opinion, the circular economy for food should evolve. And that this can be summarized in the 3C for the circular economy for food, which are the C of capital, cyclicality, and coevolution. Obviously, in this scientific article quoted in this slide, you can find more details on this cultural framework. But in few words, I can say that preserving and regenerating the natural capital to which human, cultural, and economic capital is associated is the starting point for an ecological transition in a more systemic and circular case. Cyclicality instead represents the working method that, starting from adopting systemic approach to analyze and design, encompasses three fundamental concepts: extension of product life and producer responsibility, metabolization of any surplus, and finally, the use of renewable resources and energy. But finally, this three C works if we had the last three, the C of coevolution, that indicates the set of priority and conditions that a project must have in order to be considered circular. For example, the adherence to a collaborative and systemic paradigm, which through the application of a win-win logic, or in other words, a mutualistic symbiosis, generates an advantageous solution for everyone, including the environment. Well, guys, I hope these three keywords will help you with your project proposal. And now, finally, just a few words about a series of examples I'm working on applying this type of approach with the purpose of telling you that theory evolves only through practice, trying to change some established habits, which sometimes, as I said before, are the real obstacle to sustained development. So, for example, the concept of cyclicality was used to explain how it's possible to enhance each part of a edible product. In the case that I show you in this slide, we worked on the pumpkins, a product that in all its parts through long and short cycle of valorization of any surplus can be used at 100%, generating no waste. Well, as a university, we are writing the guidelines of circular cuisine to better define in practice what it means to apply circularity in the kitchen. The same reasoning on cyclicality can be used to develop a circular menu, for example. And this is the menu we tested for several weeks in our university canteens, providing that it works and not produce waste. It's a little bit challenging, but works. With the Life Foster project, on the other hand, instead, which is a research financed by the European Commission that see the cooperation between Italian, Spanish, French, and Maltese realities, engaged in the training of trainers and professionals in the restaurant industry. We have developed a training course for raise awareness about food waste as a systemic problem in the restaurant industry, and the possibility of preventing and reducing it through the application of a more circular practice. Well, among the initiative developed, there is the design of a web application called the Food Waste Flow Balance, which tracks the flow of raw materials and food entering in a restaurant or canteen, and the average waste associated with the hand of the service. It is a web application that works by adopting the classic simulation strategies implemented by System Dynamics, for example. Furthermore, to be application, the web application, once the data have been entered, giving information about the quantity of waste, on the environmental impact generated by waste, with a focus on water and energy, and obviously on its economic value. Thanks to the Life Foster, these research activities, we obtain a reduction of 5% in the amount of waste created in 50 training centers who participated in the monitoring using the web application, and this allowed an average saving of 3% from an economic point of view. This is a research that we do fall into the context of co-evolution, because it is important to remember that acquiring information in the kitchen quickly is certainly a relevant aspect to raise awareness. Another research of which I'm very proud is the one entitled FUSILI, which is an acronym of Fostering the Urban Food System Transformation through Innovative Living Lab Implementation. But anyway, it's a research that works on the development of living labs that promote circularity in the urban context. And thanks to the collaboration with the city of Turin, we have created new circular business models. So, for example, the concept of circular pizza, the concept of circular kiosk, or the concept of circular restaurant, and we will try to demonstrate that works in the normal situation. On the other hand, also, I like to quote this other research with the city of Turin, because it's a research that application research that works on circular business model applied to the Porta Palazzo market, that is the largest outdoor European market. Well, since November 2019, through the asylum seeker volunteers, every day food surpluses are recovered from the market stall. Food is collected, stocked in a stall granted free of charge by the municipality, and distributed by filling fruit and vegetable crates in order to satisfy the demands of a family of 3 persons for 2 days, considering the quantity and the nutritional needs, obviously. So starting with a widespread campaign of communication on the importance of gaining awareness of food waste, in 2018, the project won the special mention of the International Prize Milan Pack Award section as an example of circular market. Well, finally, I could tell you about numerous other systemic and circular economy for food projects that I have developed, but I wanted to conclude by telling you about the research called the School Food for Change, which involved about 3,000 schools for a total of 600,000 children in 12 states in the European unit. The project will have an impact on about 2 million European citizens and promotes a vision of circular economy applied to school canteens that is also useful, I think, in your country. Means, for example, using all parts of an ingredient, reducing processed products, reducing energy consumption in the kitchen, making the most of surplus foods by donating into families, and many other actions. And in conclusion, the last example I want to show you is called a systemic food design, and it is an interactive tools for educational purpose and supportive tools to help the end consumer to understand the complexity of food production through the entire supply chain, considering both the raw material, energy, the packaging, primary, secondary, and tertiary, and obviously food loss and waste in each stage. Putting ourselves in the shoes of a food industry business person, the website allows us to understand the main cause and effect connection that can be difficult to see. the hidden connection. I suggest to work to all of you about this topic. Well, in 2017, the website won the European Award for the European Weeks for Waste Reduction as the best tool for education in the circular economy in the food systems. And currently more than 70,000 people have played it and becoming a circular entrepreneur in the food system. Well, let me conclude at this point by thanking you for your attention and reminding you that the bill that we are already paying as humanity, as a planet, is already very high now. And for this reason, I believe that we must join forces and learn to dream as a single interconnected systems. In my opinion, your community has an opportunity to contribute positively to this change. And that is why I gladly agreed to do this virtual talk, which I hope you enjoyed it.